Welcome to Globeship Media, where maps aren't just redrawn, they're rewritten by the forces of power, politics, and change. From trade, the fraying thread, how Canada's trade pivot is reshaping North America. A story of tariffs, shifting alliances, and an American economy discovering its closest neighbor might not always be its closest partner. Act 1. The spark that lit the fuse. A tariff. Then another. And another. What began as President Donald Trump's blunt weapon against foreign competitors has now become the domino that threatens decades of North American integration. Back in 2018-2019, Washington slapped tariffs on steel, aluminum, dairy, and other imports under the banner of America First. The immediate targets were China and Europe. But the collateral damage hit even closer. Canada, the United States, largest trading partner and the third largest in the world. At first, the rhetoric sounded like tough bargaining. But tariffs designed to show strength began quietly reshaping supply chains. By 2025, the ripple effects have become tidal waves. Empty parking lots where malls once thrived. Locked factory gates, sealed mid-shift. Corporate boardrooms where executives whisper about losing their grip on Canada, America's most reliable buyer and closest ally. And just as the U.S. turned inward, Canada looked outward. In a frost-lit conference room in Ottawa, trade ministers from 11 nations shook hands on agreements that excluded the United States entirely. American negotiators waited in a separate room, uninvited. It wasn't symbolism. It was strategy. Act 2. Canada's quiet countermove. Canada has signed sweeping trade deals with Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, South Korea, Japan, Vietnam, India, Brazil, Norway, Switzerland, and the United States. Each partner was chosen for a reason. Each offers something Canada needs or wants. And together, they give Canada leverage it never had before. Alternatives to U.S. supply chains. This isn't minor. The U.S. and Canada trade roughly $780 billion annually, more than America trades with China, Mexico, or even the entire European Union combined. The assumption in Washington was always that Canada would remain dependent. But in 2025, that assumption is unraveling. Act 3. 7 American giants on the edge. 1. The retail titan losing its northern lifeline. For years, one U.S. retail giant built an empire on Canadian consumers. 54 distribution centers along the border. 19,700 employees tied to Canadian shipments. Nearly $870 million in Canadian revenue annually. But Canada's new deals now let South Korean electronics and Japanese home goods flow directly into Canadian stores. No use warehouses. No U.S. trucks. The result? Canadian market penetration projected down 29%. Stock plunge of 9.5% the day Canada's trade deals went public. Layoff protocols already drafted for northern facilities. What was once America's backstop market is now slipping away overnight. 2. Detroit's auto parts empire facing gridlock. American auto parts have powered Canada's factories for decades. $2.7 billion in annual sales flowed north. Plants in Michigan and Ontario work like two halves of the same machine. But Canada now has preferential access to Japanese and South Korean components. Brake systems from Seoul arrive with a 15% tariff advantage. Engines from Japan clear customs faster than U.S. parts. And the whispers have started. Canadian factories considering joint ventures with Asian suppliers, potentially cutting Detroit out altogether. 3. The agricultural giant watching harvest rot. From the wheat fields of North Dakota to the soy farms of Minnesota, Canada has been a lifeline. U.S. agriculture exports $3.3 billion annually to its northern neighbor. But Australia and Brazil, two agricultural superpowers, now enjoy preferential terms. Australian wheat enters Canada with a 12% price edge. Brazilian soybeans get fast-tracked while U.S. shipments stall. The fallout? Grain elevators that once roared with shipments are falling silent. Farmers already battered by climate shocks now face collapsing Canadian demand. Analysts have begun using a chilling phrase, the new Dust Bowl. 4. Energy giants losing the pipeline advantage. Pipelines once symbolized USA and Canada energy interdependence. One American corporation alone made $4.4 billion annually from Canadian crude and gas. But with Norway's energy tech, UK financing, and Australian joint ventures, Canada is keeping more of the value chain at home. Company projections now show crude shipments south reduced by 38% in 18 months. Refinery utilization falling below 65% efficiency. A 15% stock drop since the deals were signed. Energy analysts are calling it North American market fragmentation. 5. Silicon Valley's data empire bypassed. For decades, U.S. tech firms controlled the arteries of North American data. One company alone processed 937 million transactions daily through Canadian data centers. But Canada is laying new trans-Pacific data cables directly to Asia and Europe. Singapore's low-latency hubs, Switzerland's banking networks, and the UK's AI partnerships all mean Canada no longer needs use servers as middlemen. The internal memos say it all. North American digital integration is decoupling. 6. The manufacturing conglomerate going dark. Rust Belt factories that once supplied Canada's $2.9 billion industrial imports now face a grim truth. Japan supplies better precision tools. South Korea ships advanced shipbuilding tech. Australia delivers mining equipment Canadians want. And because US and Canadian factories were interdependent, the unraveling is swift. Suppliers, workers, and small towns built on cross-border orders are left asking, who are we without Canada? 7. The financial services giant losing its northern vaults. American banks once managed $4.7 billion annually in Canadian assets. Mining firms, energy giants, and exporters all relied on Wall Street networks. Now, London, Zurich, and Singapore are offering Canadian companies direct access, often with better terms. The result? 29% of international revenue at risk. Currency trading volumes down 19%, institutional clients eyeing exits. Banking analysts call it the balkanization of North American finance. Act 4. A vicious cycle and a snowball effect. One company's losses ripple across dozens of communities. A shuttered distribution center erases trucking jobs, local diners, gas stations, and small-town banks. An auto parts contract loss in Michigan means layoffs for rubber producers in Ohio and steel suppliers in Pennsylvania. Economists calculate every dollar lost in Canadian trade costs $3.20 in U.S. economic activity. Conservative models suggest $34 billion in total losses already in motion. And that's before second-order effects accelerate. Act 5. The bigger chessboard, who benefits? Australia gains direct access to North American resources. Japan secures auto and energy markets. South Korea strengthens its foothold in manufacturing. China, meanwhile, watches as USA and Canada fractures without lifting a finger. Security analysts warn, when trade ties weaken, alliances wobble. NATO and Norwich strategies built on North American unity may face cracks in political will. The unraveling of 7 decades of integration may not take generations. It may take just one presidential term. Even Canadian business schools have quietly retooled teaching Asia Pacific trade strategies instead of U.S. integration models. A symbolic but devastating signal. The next generation no longer assumes the U.S. is Canada's future. Act 7. The edge of tomorrow. Factories standing silent. Farmers staring at unsold grain. Executives redrafting maps where Canada is no longer at the center of U.S. strategy. The threat of integration is fraying not with an explosion, but with a steady, inevitable unraveling. If Canada no longer needs America to prosper, How long before Mexico asks the same question? Or Europe? Or Asia? The dominoes are lined up. Canada just tipped the first one. The edge is closer than Washington wants to admit. The only question is, how close are we willing to get before we fall? This is the generational transformation now unfolding, not just trade disputes, but the redefinition of American economic leadership in the 20th. You've been watching Globe Shift Media, decoding the shifts that redefine nations and redraw the world map. Stay informed, stay ahead, and remember to like and subscribe to Globe Shift Media, where every shift matters.